To answer the question posed by the title of the panel, I think there are two practical things you can do to advance the goal of racial equality and justice. For starters, you can have open and honest discussions about what is driving group disparities in the first place. Conversations like we're having here today, but conversations that in my experience are not happening very many other places or very often. And second, you can recognize the limitations of what can be done through public policy to address the problem. Unfortunately, the social justice advocates that have gained prominence in recent years fail on both counts. They don't want to discuss counterproductive cultural traits, which I argue are a far bigger problem today than racism. And second, they insist that wealth redistribution schemes are the answer, as if this has never been tried before. I mean, in America alone, we spent trillions of dollars sending poor people money. If that worked, we would have solved poverty a long time ago. I mean, Ian mentioned reparations, but how is that anything other than yet another huge government wealth redistribution scheme? And why would we expect it to fare any better than the ones that have been tried before? But I'd like to back up and say a couple things about the premise of the debate over racial inequality. And I'm going to sort of piggyback on something we heard this morning from Professor Loury. I didn't mean to, but he got to go first, so I'll take that up. I'll take that up with him. And what he noted about the writings of Thomas Sowell, who's written extensively on this issue. And what I want to point out is that social justice and traditional justice are two very different things. And progressives are attempting to redefine what is commonly understood when we talk about justice or fairness in society. Traditional justice is about ensuring an impartial process. It's not about guaranteeing certain results. A defendant in a criminal case has received justice if the trial is conducted under fair rules with an impartial judge and jury, regardless of whether the verdict is guilty or not guilty. A basketball game is considered fair if everyone plays by the same rules, regardless of who wins. Social justice is closer to the opposite of that. Rules and standards are set aside in hopes of achieving certain results, and the larger ramifications to society are downplayed or ignored. Think about a university admissions process that has one set of criteria for Asian applicants and a different set for whites. What matters most to the social justice advocate is the outcome, not the process. And the process can be rigged to get the desired result, such as more racial balance on campus, even if that means discriminating against certain groups to get that outcome. Now, this is not simply a question of semantics. The social justice advocates bring an almost utopian mindset to these issues of social and economic equality. Their presumption is that equal outcomes, or something approaching equal outcomes, is the norm in society, and that where you don't find it, something nefarious must be going on. This is not to say that we shouldn't be bothered by inequality. We should be, and most of us are. We wouldn't be here. But the goal is to understand why it persists. And the reason inequality persists is because it is the norm. It's not the exception. Disparities and gaps and inequities are not always strange or sinister. They're natural and widespread. They exist in all kinds of human endeavors, all around the world, down through history. Yes, discrimination and exploitation can worsen inequality, but they hardly explain these disparate outcomes, which exist even among groups of the same race and ethnicity. The reality is different groups often have different cultures, different behaviors, different attitudes and habits, which is why people don't tend to advance at the same rate. Not within countries and not between countries. Not historically and not currently. Nor is there any guarantee that a group that has advanced will stay advanced. These aren't written in stone. China, in a previous era, was the most advanced society on the planet. Later, it would be the Middle East, then Europe, and America. The ancient Greeks and Romans were far more advanced than their British or Scandinavian counterparts. Just a few generations ago, China was a very poor and backward country. Today, it's one of the richest nations on earth. Again, these disparities exist not only between countries, but within them. People in isolated, mountainous regions tend to lag behind people from the lowlands. People who live on coast have been more advanced than people who live inland. It doesn't matter whether these are people of the same race or people of different races. The bottom line is that disparities are commonplace. Yet we continue to have a debate about inequality that treats it as weird or otherworldly. Scholars who have studied societies down through history have never found this evenness in group advancement that social justice advocates tell us is normal and would exist today in society if it weren't for racism or discrimination or exploitation. Progressives want to see equal representation among groups in test scores and graduation rates and professional occupations and criminal behavior and income levels. But they can't point to a single society ever where this has happened. It's utopian. Thomas Sowell, who I mentioned earlier, and who has written extensively on the origins of inequality, was once asked by an interviewer on television why some groups in society do better than others, and I'll close by sharing his response with you. I would look at it differently, he said. I would say, and especially in the United States, I would say, why would we expect different groups to do the same? I say especially in the United States because there are very few indigenous Americans. Americans have come here from all over the world. And why would you expect that countries that had entirely different histories, located in entirely different climates, different geographies, why would you expect those countries to develop exactly the same mix of skills to exactly the same degree so that their people would arrive on these shores in such a way that they would be represented evenly across the board? Especially since even in countries where most of the population is indigenous, you don't find it there. Nowhere in the world do you find this evenness that people use as a norm, he said. And I find it fascinating that they will hold up as a norm something that has never been seen on this planet and regard as an anomaly something that is seen in country after country after country. So again, if we want to address these social inequality issues, we need to have honest discussions about what is driving them and what is not driving them. And we need to make sure that the debate is framed properly. I'll stop there.